My name's Will Cunningham. I am the branch manager for the Plantation Lifestyle International Realty. Um, I joined that Lifestyle International Realty about 2 years ago. Prior to that, I was working for my wife. She had her own small boutique brokerage called GLM Realty. And I guess just to put it mildly, Lifestyle had such an impression on us that we decided to close our brokerage and join the great people over here at Lifestyle National Realty. So I've been doing real estate for about 9 years, and it's been little did I know, because when I met my wife, she was already a realtor and didn't really like real estate too much. You know, every time we would go somewhere, she would be talking to people that was realtors, and most of her friends was realtors. I had no idea what they was talking about because I wasn't a realtor at the time. So she convinced me to leave my corporate job because, you know, I was getting a little bit tired of the stress and the daily work and the Sundays, getting ready to start that grind Monday to Friday. And I wanted to have a little bit more freedom and to choose and do some other things and have some other options. So I took it on, got my license, and really it's been the best thing that I've ever done in terms of profession in my life. So much for me. Today's topic is going to be negotiating a successful real estate transaction. Okay. And in real estate, the majority of what you will be doing is negotiating, whether it's an inspection, whether it's an appraisal, whether it's negotiating a listing, trying to get a listing, whether it's trying to get a buyer, everything is in negotiating. So, due to the fact that this is one of the most important parts of real estate, I want to just touch on a few basic principles that I use and I have used in my career as a realtor. And hopefully, you know, throughout this training session that we're going to try and keep brief, but I want to get straight to the point. I can give you guys something that you can take use going forward in a new transaction that you have or old transaction that you have had, if that makes sense. So to start off with, you know, negotiating is not something that you want to do aggressively. A lot of people say you want to go in with the hammer, you want to go in, you know, with steel. Negotiating is not something that you do aggressively. And Lord knows we know when you're in the middle of a deal and, you know, we eat what we kill. So you want to make money. But what you don't want to do is get your emotions caught up into what's best for your client. Mind you, you're not just trying to get to the closing table, although that is very important. You're trying to keep a client. And you want that client to have an experience where that client can not only remain your client, that client had such an experience that they're willing to give their best friends, their family members to you as a referral. Okay, if that makes sense. By the way, at any point you guys have any questions throughout this training, feel free to put it in the chat. I'm flying solo today, so uh, raise your hand if you have any questions, or you can unmute yourself and feel free to ask the question, and we'll stop and keep going. Um, if you can negotiate calmly, professionally, with confidence, you'll win every time. And it starts with being prepared. Okay. I like to always look at it as if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. There's no other way about it. There's no if and buts about it. Numbers don't lie, data don't lie. So what you want to do is in any negotiating situation, you want to already be prepared, whether it's an inspection or negotiation, you want to have or a price negotiation. You want to always be prepared. Know the market. Okay. Know why you're coming in where you're coming in at. All right. Moving on. Okay. Before we get into tactics, we need to talk about mindset. Mindset. Deals fall apart when emotions take over, either yours or the client's. If you've been with Lifestyle for any length of time, you know any trainer that comes in and starts speaking, the first thing they start speaking about is mindset. Mindset is everything, not just in real estate, but life. There's an old cliche that says, and I'm a former football coach, and I always tell my kids, and some of you may have heard this before, if you say you can, you will. If you say you can't, you won't. It's just that simple. So you have to go into any transaction, any negotiation periods, with a mindset saying that, you know what, this is going to work out for not only for me, but more importantly, it's going to work out for everybody else involved. And mind you, yeah, we know as realtors we want to get to the closing table, but you got to understand there's other people involved. So what might be the best thing for you getting to the closing table may not be the best thing for that person that you're representing, may not be the best thing for the person that's on the other side. Can't everybody be happy or ecstatic at the same time? But for the most part, when you go into negotiations as a realtor and not just thinking about your better needs, but you're thinking about that client, mind you, you're going to develop a better relationship with that client. I've went into properties before, and my client has basically said, yeah, I want to do this. And I would see things because we have realtor eyes that I said, nah, this property's not for you. And look, it could have been a layup. It could have been something that, you know what, we can go ahead and get to the closing table. But what I don't want is buyer's remorse. Don't want a client to come in and say, 3, 4 months later and say, man, I should have went with that other house. Da, 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 da. So, we don't want to tell people what to do, but at the same time, we want to guide them the right way. And especially when that client sees that, you know what, he's not just trying to get, or he or she is not just trying to get a deal closed. They actually care about me. And that speaks volume in terms of the relationship that you build with that client throughout that transaction. Once again, you're not just trying to get to the closing table. You're trying to develop a relationship. You're still developing your business. So if you can develop the business, develop the relationship with that client, and at the same time get the closing table, beautiful. Okay. But you don't want to sell your soul because you're so desperate to get to the closing table, if that makes sense. Okay. And I always speak at it as, your role is to mirror, your role is not to mirror the client's emotions. Your role is to slow things down, bring facts to the table, and help them make good decisions, just like I was just speaking about. I always like to prep my clients, especially if I have a new buyers, first-time buyers. Remember, they're making the biggest financial decision that they probably have made up to that time and probably ever will make. So they're going to come in scared. They're going to come in emotional. They're going to ask all kinds of questions. But I like to start with, and I say this to all my clients, when you see me worry, you worry, okay? Because I'm not going to worry, okay? We're going to go into every situation and we're going to cross bridges as we get to it, okay? Yes, this could happen, that can happen, and the negative side, but this can happen and that can happen on the positive side as well. And when we speak about mindset, mindset is basically a reflection of what inside of you that you're pouring out into the outside of you. So what people need to see is confidence, professionalism, and a certainty that everything's going to work out for your better good, because it always does. I mean, years and years I've stressed so many things when it came to real estate. I stressed and I like to think of my training today as a therapy session. I stressed inspections. I stressed appraisals. Oh my God, is it going to appraise? You know what I'm saying? And I've lost a lot of sleep about it. Okay. But after doing this for a while, and this is not just for the seasoned agent, this for the new agent. If you've done a deal, you've done 1 or 2 deals or no deals, you still have to take this mindset. And you need to project to your client that, you know what, I got everything under control. And you can't do that by what I call getting in a hole with them. And if you can just use your imagination right now, if someone's in a hole and they can't get out, do you get in the hole with them? Or you throw a rope down there and you calmly pull them out if they grab the rope? Well, I'm not going to get in a hole with you. What I will do is we're going to solve the problem, but I'm not going to stress the problem. So if you're stressing, that has nothing to do with me. Okay? Because if I pinch myself right now, nobody on this Zoom call can feel it. You can kind of, have compassion that I just pinched myself and I might be in pain, but you can't feel it. So the same thing works with a transaction. Okay? You cannot get emotionally involved with the transaction. You can be compassionate, but keep your emotions out of it. All right? So I spoke about preparation. Uh, You should be able to explain clearly and confidently why your offer or counter makes sense. That means knowing the comps, days on the market, and current trends. If you can't justify a number with data, you shouldn't be negotiating it. Facts. Okay. So what you want to try to do is keep your opinion pretty much to yourself. You can give your opinion, but if that opinion is not followed with data, because numbers don't lie, okay? Which means case in point, if you're trying to convince your seller, look, you know, we need to lower this price because we're not really getting any movement. There have only been one or two showings. There's been no offers. The majority of sellers just usually have a foregone conclusion on what they think their property is worth. That's their baby. So if you're walking up to them telling them that it's worth less than what they think it is, it can kind of be a little bit, it can go off the wrong way. I won't say it would be insulting, but it can come off the wrong way. So what I like to do is, okay, I'm coming to my seller saying, you know what, we need to lower this price, and this is why this is this. It's just what I just got through saying. But what does that mean to the seller? What that means to the seller is that you're telling me my house is not worth what you told me it was earlier. Okay. And as we know, the market, and not necessarily the market that what has sold dictates the price of the house. The market of the value of what's going on during that listing is what dictates the value. As we know, this is a revolving market. The same market that we had 2 months ago don't exist. 4 months ago, 5 months ago don't exist. So what I like to do is when I go to a seller and say, you know what, we need to lower this price, I prepare a net sheet. And if you guys, most of you know what a net sheet is, but I like to give 3 scenarios. Say for instance, it's listed for 500,000. We want to lower it. I want to show them what 490 look like. I want to show them what 480 look like. If their bottom line is 470, I want to show them what that looked like because the majority of people, they're visual, and like I said, that's not your opinion. That is a fact. And not only that, I want to go in and show them, all right, this house sold, but this was 3 months ago for this price. Here's 3 listings that's active that they've been on the market for over 100 days that's priced the same way yours is, and it's very comparable to what your property is. Now, if you want to sit it out for another 5, 6 months, go for it. But you told me that you were motivated to sell. So these are the things we need to do. So by showing them the net sheet, they may look at that 470 and say, you know what? I can live with that. But if you don't put it in front of them, that means nothing to them. Basically, you just insulted them. Okay? All right. Any questions up to this point? Let's see if we have anything in the chat. All right. Awesome. All right. Core negotiating strategies. Okay. One of the most important jobs is setting expectations early. Let your client know that negotiating involves compromise, offer, and agreement. So basically what you want to do is kind of prep. What I like to do is prep whether I'm working with a buyer or I'm working with a seller. If you're going in with that listing and you're trying to get that listing, guys, go in not only having the comps, be professional, but give them the scenarios, not necessarily scenarios, but give them step by step from the pictures, the photos, from the showings, and they need to have a somewhat of an idea on what this transaction is going to look like, because the element of surprise sometimes don't go well with people. Okay, so not only do you speak it to them and tell them step by step from the beginning to the end, put it in writing, send them a nice little email so they can have something to go back and reflect to. Not only that, once you're under contract, we all know the importance of having your critical dates. Okay, so not only are you going by the critical dates, the inspection period, excuse me, the loan contingency period, they have something to go by. Okay, so they're not caught off balance. So again, it gets back to preparation. Know your clients. Okay. New agents often focus on price. Experienced agents is focus on the entire package, which means price, closing date, repairs, possession, These are all tools you can use to create to win. So the price is important. Okay. So whether you're a buyer agent or seller agent, the price is very important. We all know everybody want, to make money. You want to make money. Price is important. But there are other things, contingencies in that offer that will add value to that offer. Okay. For one, inspection periods. Okay. Inspection periods is pretty much something that it depends on the market, but I can tell you in the South Florida market, you want to have as short of inspection period as possible because mind you, this is time being wasted. So if you come in with a 10 to 15 day inspection period, that means they've been negotiating for 10 to 15 days. That's time lost where they could have gotten another offer. So they're not going to want to do a 10, 15, 20-day inspection period. I have inspectors I have three inspectors that they're ready to get down anytime I call them. Okay. If it needs to be the next day, they can get down, they can go and they can make it there. So it's very important to have the team in place. Okay. Meaning inspector, title company, etc. So if I have an inspection, okay, well, I lost my train of thought. Oh, yes. So price is an inspection period. It's the appraisal. How quick can you get the loan approved? Okay, loan approval usually can go anywhere from 15 to 20 days would be a good loan approval. I know that some people use 30 days, but it takes about 30 to 45 days to close. And mind you, if basically if the loan is not approved, then your buyer can get out of that deal. Meanwhile, the seller has had that property off the market for that length of time, and it's just not a good. Me as a listing agent, if you tell me 30 days for a loan approval, I'm going to send you over there to speak with your lender and see if you can get 15, 20 days. Because I don't want to wait 30 days. Then I'm going to close maybe that next day before loan approval. So if it's 30 days and I have 35 days to close, it could be 5 days before I'm supposed to close. And all of a sudden I find out that the buyer didn't get the loan. Okay. Then you got to start over. So that's just strategy. Okay. The other thing that you want to look at is repairs. So when you're negotiating repairs, I like to with the inspection, you want to also prep your buyers, especially and just to slow down just a minute. When you have buyers again that's very nervous about everything, okay? And I had this one inspector, love him to death, but he really didn't know how to give bad news, if that makes sense. And it could be a light bulb missing, and that he would make it sound like the roof was coming in. Okay. So, and I really like that inspector, still use him to the day. I won't call any names just in case you know him, but I pretty much had to sit down and say, hey, look, man, at the end of the day, these are the three things that's important to me as a realtor that's representing my client. Okay. Safety, which can include wiring, the breaker box, the electrical box, any kind of loose wiring, something that's you might have wire that's exposed that needs to be, that's important. Okay. Not that all of it's not important. I mean, the buyer can make his own decision, but I'm talking about the three major things. The HVAC, AC, because in South Florida, you need it. Okay. You can't really function without it. And the roof. Okay. And so what I like to do is go in and talk to my buyer beforehand the inspection and say, hey, look, this is what's going to happen with this inspection. Let me give you a quick briefing. Okay. That inspector is working for you, not me, not the seller. So that inspector's job is to find everything that is wrong with that property. However, the majority of the things, with the exception of these three things I just mentioned, is basically something telling you that this is something that needs to have your attention after you've bought the property and you have this much time of life length before you need to pay attention to it. And a lot of agents don't really know how to go in and explain that to their buyers. Then the buyers see something that shouldn't kill a deal, and it end up killing the deal because you haven't prepped that buyer to what's important in that inspection report. It took me years to learn that, guys. Okay. And like I said, I nicknamed my inspector the deal killer because usually after he's spoken with them, I had to go back and calm down the buyer. All right, man, this is this is not no big this is not a big deal. We can get through this, da da da. So what I learned how to do is have a strategy where I can go in and kind of give my buyer expectations, okay, and let my buyer know that look, we're not trying to, this house is good. The inspector is paid to find things and let you know about things, because remember, the inspector got a responsibility too. And if something happens, especially electrical, and that house turn around and it becomes a fire or something that God forbid, they can come back after him. So that inspector needs to really get that information. Okay. Do we have any questions? Anything in the chat? All right. I guess I'm doing pretty good then. All right. Moving on.
Question.
Yes.
Okay, have you had an experience with let's say like a roof? Because I keep
Mhm.
hitting a wall with a certain buyer because I guess the way that I presented the whole roof situation. So we've gone under contract on properties, and once the inspection report comes back, or I let her know ahead of time, hey, this the roof is kind of close to the end of its life. How would you say you navigate or like guide your buyer? And what is a good suggestive I don't know how to phrase this. Basically, if they to not kill the deal, because if the roof has like say 5 years of life left, and the buyer, I've the way I guess I've pitched it to her has made her feel like that's not a good house to go, after because of the age of the roof.
Yeah, I understand your question. Let's start with this. I have gotten many homes under contract that the roof was at or kind of past its life expectancy. The only issue that would be with a roof like that is one, obviously the material fact. If you can see leaks, okay, and you know how to recognize that, the inspector does, because you can look at the ceiling and see the watermarks. Two, you got to this is what I like to explain to a lot of my buyers and even my sellers. You got to remember that the life expectancy of a roof was created by who?
The
Roofers.
insurance companies.
Not just the insurance company, roofers. The insurance companies got it from the roofers. Remember, insurance
Uh-huh.
companies is not roofers. They don't know. So
Mhm.
just like the insurance company go to a termite inspector, they use a termite inspection. They use a wind mitigation. They use 4 points. They get their information from the pros, right? So
Mhm.
let's just say the roofer says, you know what, it's 15 years life expectancy on this particular roof. If it's a shingle roof, if it's a barrel roof, it's 30 years. I can tell you something from my experience. I just sold a house that was built in 2002 with the original roof, okay, and it never had a leak. So, in my ever so humble opinion, I really believe that these roofing companies put the life expectancies in place. They're out to make money. Okay, that's the bottom line. They're going to tell you every time that you need a roof. Okay, but in
Right.
reality, 5 years left in life expectancy for a roof. First of all, it can be insured because I've gotten them insured that was at the life expectancy. Okay, so don't now their premium may go up a little bit, but it can still close. Okay, but if it has 5 years left on as life expectancy, and it all gets back to what I was saying earlier. What's your name again? I'm sorry, I don't want to.
Rashonda.
Yeah, Rashonda. It all goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's a matter of making sure that that client has confidence in what you're guiding them and leading them. Okay, and at
I
the end
think
of the day,
now I have literally put her in a position to where she feels like every house that she fall in love with tends to have a roof at the end of its life, and now she's expecting the seller to give $25,000 to replace the roof, and I keep hitting this wall with her.
yeah, yeah, that 25,000, that will replace the roof. What you have to convince her is, look, I can go after concession to help you, you know, repair the roof, but it starts with you can, and you know what? Someone just put a comment on here, and they're 100% right. It's an estimated life. Could fail earlier, but could last much longer than expected. Okay, and that's exactly what I was saying. So
Yeah.
it all get back, and look, the damage has already been done a little bit.
Right.
But here's the facts. Okay, you want a newer roof, you got to up your price. I don't know what she qualified for, but at the end of the day, you run into the roof situations because, in my opinion, that's where they have it priced because they know they have a roof situation. Now, if you run into a seller that know they don't have they got a brand new roof, now you're looking at $1,000 more in the price. So,
We were under contract on a house for 789. We agreed at that purchase price and with a $12,000 credit. When the inspection came back and we realized the roof was at the end of its life, the seller threw in an additional $15,000 credit. She walked away
all right, so
because it because
uh,
it didn't cover
yeah,
the full.
this is what I'm gonna give you, and I understand that. Look, we eat what we kill, and for no pun intended. So you're motivated, but the time that you're dealing with something that might just keep you in a pigeonhole, you're missing deals out there. Understand what I'm
Absolutely.
saying? You're caught up
Absolutely.
emotionally, and sometimes sometimes you got to cut your losses. You can't
Yeah.
cut off your nose despite you don't want to cut off your nose despite your face, but sometimes you got to say, you know what, maybe I can't help you because look,
Yeah.
we're not miracle workers, okay? We negotiate, we facilitate, but we're not miracle workers. I can't help you. And I'm gonna tell you something. There's nothing wrong with a house with a roof with 5 years of life left. So you're speaking to a wall right now with her. And like I
Right.
said, the damage has already been done. But getting back to what I was saying is, again, preparation. Okay. If you know you're working with a skitsy buyer, and we all do from time to time, and it'll drive us nuts. Don't get emotionally involved with what their emotion is, and which is going to lead me. That's a great. Thank you so much. I hope that answered your question.
It did. It's been really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. That's going to actually that was a great interlude to my next point, and we're going to go through a couple of more things. I'm gonna get it wrapped up because I know you guys got things to do, and it's getting up to that time. Um, Again, you can't feel for nobody. That's not the way it works. Okay, it's you go in, you try to do the best you can, but you can't feel for anybody. Um, so the reason why that leads me to my next subject is we're going to talk about silence, and I don't mean silence and ignoring someone, but if you have a buyer, seller, or a client in general that they're emotional, you give them the facts, you give them the data, and then they're going to respond. It might be, oh my God, da 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 da. Silence. Silence. Silence is the loudest voice in negotiating with someone that can't be negotiated with. Like in this young lady's case, this woman is, I'm sure she has good intentions, but she's nervous. And a lot of times what we'll do, we'll try to out talk them, then we'll match their emotions. That's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to stay calm, okay? We're supposed to basically just say, you know what, I can't feel what you feel right now. Here's the facts. Here's the numbers. Here's the data. Here's the proof. This is the reason why. This is why we're doing that. That's it. Okay. But once you match their emotions and then you're going back and forth with them, you just got it. Like I said earlier, you just got back in the hole with them. Okay. And that's not what we want to do. We don't want to get in the hole. We'll throw a rope, we'll reach our hand down there if we can reach you, but you don't want to get in the hole with them. Okay. And again, it gets back to being professional. Okay. And never losing your cool. Because at the end of the day, that buyer or that seller is going to get emotional for that moment, but the way you respond can kill that relationship for eternity. Okay, and sometimes by not responding, just say, well, listen, which is what I usually like to say. Look, pray on it. I want the best for you. I know you want the best for you. Sleep on it. We'll revisit it in the morning and we'll see where you're at. If you're at the same place, then you know what, no problem. Okay, because I can tell you, I had one deal years ago that we got like 3 days to the closing table. We were 3 days away from the closing table. And her situation was she had found a house that needed a lot of work done to it. And her boyfriend was supposed to do the work for free. Well, her and her boyfriend got into an argument. He broke up with her. So now she don't have someone to go in and rehab the property. She called me. No, she texted me. Look, I do apologize. I know this sucks, but I'm gonna have to get out of this deal. 3 days from closing. I never forget, I just left the gym. I'm sitting in the car. I just put my head on the steering wheel. I wanted to get out of the car and start screaming and running. But something spoke to me and said, you know what? I got to remember what's best for her too, not just for me. So when I negotiate things, that's what I remember, what's best for her. Now, mind you, she had $13,000 in escrow that she was willing to lose. And she was pretty well off, but who wants to lose $13,000? So when I did get on the phone, I spoke to her. She said, look, I know I'm gonna lose the money. I still want a house, but now I got to find a house that's more suitable and like more turnkey because I don't have anybody to do the renovation. So here's the point here. If I start tripping and call her, what do you mean? Da, 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 da. Guess what? She went to another realtor. Okay. I remained calm. I told her I want what's best for you. And I want to get your $13,000 back. She said, no, you can't. I said, yes, I can. And the way I got it back, and here's the learning curve, guys, knowing your contract. Okay. By me knowing my contract, I knew that there was an association approval. And that association approval have to be approved 5 days prior to closing. She hadn't gotten approval. She hadn't even received an email from the association. My attorney but I have a real estate attorney, and that goes back to about having a team available. I emailed my attorney. He was on vacation. I told him, gave him the scenario. He said, yeah, no, that escrow deposit go back to her because that's in the contract. I don't know what line it is right now because I don't know the numbers and all that kind of stuff. But if you go into the contract, there's a portion in there where I speak about the association approval, and it has to be done. So if you're on the buyer side, you want to make sure that stays. If you leave it blank, I think it's 5 days. But if you're on the seller side and you know you're the listing agent and you know that association is slow, you want to make that you want to counter that number by a smaller number. If that makes sense. Okay. Therefore, that's not an out because, mind you, we have an as-is contract, but a good attorney can find something in that contract to get out of it. Okay. So, long story short, I got her escrow deposit back. I took her back out the next week looking for properties. She found a property that was turnkey. I showed her 2 properties after that. We closed in 3 weeks. Okay. So that goes back to me not tripping, staying calm, staying professional, looking at my client's best interest and not so much mine. Now, I needed the money. I'm not going to even front. I had already spent the money. Okay. But it always work out, guys. So don't panic. All right. So we're gonna wrap it up. And I just want to leave you guys with something. Negotiation is not about being the loudest or the toughest person in the room. It's about preparation, professionalism, and problem solving. If you focus on solutions instead of conflict, you will close more deals and build stronger reputations. Guys, I'm going to make this short and sweet. As realtors, we are leaders, and you can't lead from behind. So if you get tangled up in negotiating, if you get tangled up in these relationships with your client, you can't lead them. You become a client that just have more knowledge than they do. Okay, so it's all about believing. It's all about having faith. I put God first, and I'm not one that can speak on religion because that's not what I do. But at the same time, know that anytime you're going into a transaction negotiation, who's watching you? Who got your back? Okay, and when you go into it knowing that, you can't lose. You can't lose with the stuff he used. All right. Look, do we have any questions? Nope. All right. I'd like to thank you guys for joining us. Go out and be great. God love and serve. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.